1 year ago, I wanted a new car that was a one-stop solution for everything I wanted. It needed to be practical enough for a daily driver while still having a fun factor to it, so that it could make any commute enjoyable and engaging. Life's too short to drive boring cars, and the amount of time I spend in a car, I might as well be in one that I truly enjoy driving. And so, I settled on this, my 2024 Subaru WRX TR in Sapphire Blue Pearl. Now, 1 year later, did this car achieve all the expectations that I had hoped for when I first bought it? That's what we'll discuss in this video, and a whole lot more regarding my 1 year ownership of the VB WRX TR. Now, did the car achieve the fun and engaging factor that I was looking for when I first bought it? Yes, it did 100%. I have so much fun driving this car every single day. It hasn't bored me, even in the stock form that I have right now. It puts a smile on my face, honestly, every time I hop into this car. No, it's not the fastest in a straight line, but that's not a huge priority for me. It's quick enough for the street, and honestly, having a car with short gears that you can rip through without getting up to atrocious speeds is refreshing, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. Now, if you're expecting to go buy a WRX and win some roll races on a Mexican highway, you won't, not without some proper modifications, which is an avenue you can take just because the F824 is an awesome platform to modify. However, in stock form, this car is really not that fast compared to a lot of its competitors out there. But if 0 to 60 times is really that important for you, then maybe the WRX isn't the car for you. And maybe you have to look at a different platform, like something European, or maybe even an EV. The WRX is for the car enthusiast who wants an engaging driving experience that rewards you the more that you push the car. The F824's power delivery is buttery smooth. The torque does not drop off whatsoever throughout the power band. There's no weird dips or drops like in the previous generation F820. Now, I would say the biggest downside of the F824 is that the rev limit is set at 6,000 RPM. Which is really low in my opinion. And if you're driving really aggressively, that RPM limit catches up to you much quicker than you expect. So you do have to be attentive. Now, this car has 0 rev hang, which is great. It allows you to get smooth shifts off without a challenge. Now, when it comes to shift feel, if I had to describe it in one word, I would say crunchy. It has this classic WRX transmission crunch to it. And I do have to say, if you're coming from a platform, let's say a Honda platform where you drive an SI or a Type R, this shifter will not feel as precise as those shifters. You may find it even a little sloppy. But I don't think that's a negative thing. I think it's just a quirk and characteristic of a WRX transmission. Now, where the WRX shines is around corners. It has oodles of grip with a proper set of tires, and it's not only in the dry, but also in the wet and snow. The all-wheel drive system just provides so much confidence around corners. Now, the biggest downside is when you do push it hard, you do feel that understeer. It's something you simply just can't avoid with an all-wheel drive car. Despite the WRX not having limited slip diffs, I haven't found it lacking in any way. And that might be due to the fact that the VB WRX chassis is stiffer than any previous generation WRX or STI chassis in the past, which increases its torsional rigidity, which allows the suspension to work more effectively and efficiently under hard cornering, which in turn keeps the car stable around corners. Let's talk about ride quality. The TR's ride is quite stiff out of the box. The suspension is stiffer than the other trim levels of the WRX, and coupling that with the 19-inch wheels and the slim profile sidewall tires results in a harsh ride. Now, that wasn't a surprise when I was buying this car, but daily driving this for over a year now, it does get quite tiresome. And I decided to switch over the 19-inch wheels for an 18-inch wheel setup for a taller sidewall tire. So I went with a 245/40/18 on a set of 2015 BBS STI wheels. And I do have to say that the ride has significantly improved since I made the swap over. And I don't think I'll be ever going back to a 19-inch wheel setup for this car in particular. Next up are the Brembo Brakes, and they have been phenomenal for me this past year. They feel as good as new. There's no issue with brake fade or braking power. They're very predictable. Overall, really good brakes and worth the upgrade over the other trim levels of the WRX. Now, the one thing I did notice in colder weather, let's say colder than -5 degrees Celsius, is that the brakes start to squeal. When I'm approaching a full stop, the brakes are loud and they have this squealing noise, which I think is a characteristic of Brembos, mainly when they're cold. It doesn't annoy me that much, but it's something to note. Let's talk sound, and I've already talked about this in my 10,000 kilometer review of the car, but I want to say it again just because the sound of this car is quite muted once it's warm. You hear mainly engine noise, and you could barely hear the turbo. There's not a lot of note out of the exhaust. So overall, it's a quiet car. And that's not a bad thing in my opinion, especially for a daily driver. You don't want anything too obnoxious. Now, the obnoxious part happens during a cold start. This car is surprisingly loud at a cold start. And I mean, it's aftermarket exhaust loud. When I owned my 2001 Bug-Eye STI, that car had a Fujitsu exhaust. Essentially, it was a fart cannon. And the cold start on that car wasn't anywhere close to as loud as this car stock, which is a huge surprise. And it's just something to get used to. I know the aftermarket can fix that with a tune and with a different exhaust, but something to note for you guys if you are wanting to buy this car and you live in a neighborhood where maybe your neighbors are a little sensitive, this cold start will be obnoxious for them. The last thing that I want to talk about in this driving segment is Eyesight. And I've already made a video on this, so do check that out if you want a more in-depth review. But there are a couple things I want to bring up that I've noticed in my year of driving this car. And the first thing is that Eyesight saved my butt once. And it happened in stop and go traffic because there was construction on the highway and someone didn't check their blind spot and cut me off. And Eyesight reacted and made my car go to a full stop. Now, to me, it was a 50-50 toss-up whether or not I would have been able to react faster than Eyesight. So for that, I think Eyesight saved my front bumper and that person's back bumper from any damage. So good on Eyesight for saving my car. The second thing is that I really like using adaptive cruise control. So here I am on the highway, I set my speed and my following distance, and it really does a good job centering me in the lane and just letting me cruise. And around corners, it does actually do the steering for you as long as you put enough pressure on the steering wheel. So it's a lot of easy driving on the highway with this car, which I really do appreciate on the long commutes home on the highway. The biggest downside to Eyesight is when you want to do some spirited driving on some back roads. It really doesn't allow you to do that, just because if you're taking corners and making these aggressive maneuvers, it starts to beep all these warnings at you, like lane departure and things like that. So I suggest if you want to take this car on some back roads on the weekend, turn traction control completely off through 2 button presses. So 1 button press to go into track mode and then 1 longer button press, and that will turn all the nannies off. It's just annoying that you have to do that every single time and you can't just hop in the car, press a button and go. It's just one extra step, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's just kind of a thing we have to deal with all modern cars, with all the safety tech that's enforced and implemented by regulation. Okay guys, I decided to come back to my home studio to talk about some other topics on the WRX. Let's talk reliability.
have I had any reliability issues? And the short answer is no. This car hasn't skipped a beat for me. I drove this car through a whole Canadian winter, even during the weeks when the temperatures dropped close to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The car started up and drove fine with no issues. The FA24 has proven to be one of Subaru's most reliable WRX engines ever, both in stock and modified form, and my car hasn't given me a reason to think otherwise. Let's talk practicality. Although the WRX is considered a compact sedan, it's a lot more roomier than you may think. I've hauled friends and family countless amount of times and none of them ever felt cramped or squished in the interior. Also, since the rear seats do fold down, you can fit a lot of things through the pass-through. Whether it be tools, material, or groceries, it's a very usable and agile space for just hauling things. The second thing that I want to talk about regarding practicality is fuel mileage. As this car is my daily driver, fuel is one of the highest operational costs for it. And I've been averaging between 9.5 liters to 10 liters per 100 kilometers. To me, that's really not too bad for a full-time all-wheel drive turbo Subaru. It's definitely better than the STI and probably very similar to the FA20 in the previous generation WRX. Overall, I'm pleased with the fuel economy and it's something that isn't really breaking the bank in terms of ownership costs. I should also mention that I fill up my car religiously with 94 octane from Esso and that my typical driving is 60% city and 40% highway. So if you do a lot of highway driving, I'm sure your numbers will be even better than what I got. Moving on to the exterior, and there's a couple things I want to get through here. Before I bought this car, a lot of people have told me that new Subarus don't have the thickest paint. And unfortunately, they're not wrong. I did put PPF on the first 2 feet of my car and also on the side mirrors to help repel rock chips. However, on the locations where the paint is exposed, I am noticing that some rocks from the highway have done some rock chip damage on the paint. So if you can PPF your whole car or as much as you possibly can, I highly recommend it just because a Subaru paint from the factory is not that resilient. The second thing on the interior is how water dries on the unpainted plastic bits. So for example, after a car wash, if you don't dry the inner door layers properly and you just kind of drive away from a car wash, the drainage points will go down onto the side skirt and it will leave this white water stain mark. It's almost like chalk on a chalkboard in a way. And that's just the nature of the matte texture of the plastic cladding. All the more reason to get these areas painted or color matched, just because if they were painted, those water stains will be less noticeable. It's a minor thing, I know, but I figured I should bring it up anyways. Moving to the interior, and the first thing to talk about is the screen. I'm still not in love with this screen. In my previous review, I talked about how I don't like how a lot of the HVAC controls are integrated into the screen. And yes, I still hold that same sentiment. So for whatever reason, if the screen were to fail, you will lose a lot of functionality. I've learned to live with the screen. I'm used to it now. The best thing going for it is probably that the resolution is not that bad. However, I still wish I had some hard buttons for the HVAC controls. The second thing in the interior is a rattling noise that I've noticed last fall. I was hoping the noise originated from the cold weather, that maybe the plastics were getting stiff and brittle, causing the noise to be amplified. But now that it's May and temperatures are warm, the rattling noise is still there. Unfortunately, the dealership won't do anything about it. We do have to remember that Subaru has econocar roots, which means it will have econocar materials, which exist in the WRX. So I guess my car has joined the club of all the other Subarus that have rattling interiors. On a more positive note, although some of the material may be cheap, they've held up very well. Whether it be the steering wheel, the plastic trim on the doors, even the seats, there's no excessive wear or tear signs or degradation of any of the material in any way. I think the interior is very resilient for everyday use. With that, let's move on to my closing thoughts. To me, the WRX has been the middle ground between the Impreza and the STI. It's not as performance focused as the STI, but has enough of it to be a lot more fun to own and drive than the Impreza. Now with the VB WRX being the only performance vehicle in Subaru's lineup, I believe they have shifted the WRX's performance up to be closer to the STI rather than being in the middle between the STI and the Impreza. Even though on my car, I put on an STI wing, STI wheels, and even an OEM STI trim piece on the steering wheel, I understand that it's not a STI. It doesn't have the stronger transmission, it doesn't have as much rated horsepower, and it doesn't have all the trick differentials. That's why it still remains a WRX and not a STI competitor. Just because if Subaru put all those upgrades on the VB WRX, then it wouldn't be a WRX now, will it? But the VB WRX TR has fulfilled everything I was looking for in a car. It's reliable, it's practical, and most importantly, it's fun. It's truly a one-car solution for a car enthusiast like myself, and I'm sure it would be a great option for a daily driver for a lot of you who are watching this video right now. I think the journey of my WRX just started, and I'm excited to take it to the next level with some more modifications, and that may include power mods. I know a lot of you are eager to see that. If you daily drive a VB WRX, let me know down in the comments why you decided on a WRX as a daily. I'm curious to know. Anyways, that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.